Welcome back. You're watching Crossfire. Thank you for staying with us. We're on to the conversation of the day. President Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday during the Mashujaa Day celebrations held in Kirinyaga announcing a 25 billion shilling stimulus package that will help or be part of the interventions to ensure that the economy grows to about 6% of economic growth. But also the big question then is the kind of economic recovery path or journey Kenya is in. Are we on the right track? I'm hosting two legislators here tonight. Sakwa Bunyasi is a member of parliament for Nambale. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.
And Vita, member of parliament, Abdul Swamad Sharif Nasir. Very good to have you here on Crossfire again. Kimani Chungwa, the member of parliament for Kikuyu, will also be joining us periodically by way of phone to just also weigh in on the conversation of the day as we break down this stimulus package. Look at where Kenya has been for about a year and a half since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Are we on the right track? Remember, you can ask questions to our panelists here at Akisa Wandera at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is Crossfire. I'll be sampling a number of your views and your questions as we continue with the program till the top of the hour at 11 p.m. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Big day yesterday. First, of course, excitement that curfew has finally been lifted 1.5 years on. I don't know, what do you think about that? Is it about time?
I must say, that was a great opener. People have been, we've seen in the rest of the world that people are now managing with corona. A post-corona period, a post-COVID period is now just a theoretical thing. We don't know when post-COVID would be. And we know now with the efforts at vaccination, and I wish that it could even be more rapid, that we can actually, evidence has shown that you can actually muddle through. We don't know when the sharp challenges there would be. I hope people don't think that because they've eased off the restriction, that now you can forget all about the protocols, the COVID protocols. I hope that people can keep to that while we try to get on with our own business. Unfortunately, in the entertainment industry, it's not all been opened up. I had today in the news media that the Inspector General of Police says social places, bars and so on are still shut at 7. That's one sector that employs a lot of people, particularly in cities. And I'm sure my colleague here would agree with me that in a place like his constituency particularly, these are services that are really essential. Large number of people. I just hope that they let Kenyans be responsible as adults and let people get out, eat out, drink out, and do the things they should do while they observe. It's actually 11
p.m., is it?
No, his announcement was 7. I don't know if it's entirely in consonance with the president's pronouncement. We're waiting to hear if that will get clarified.
There was that clarification by the CS today, but of course then they're saying,
The tourism CS actually gave it a different view. But I think what's most important is the Inspector General of Police needs to understand that this is a country that has set laws. The President has executive powers, and he can be able to make such a declaration. The Inspector General of Police does not have those powers. So I think he was simply trying to contain the fact that Kenyans were in a very, very jovial mood. So he was just simply trying to contain that, we don't have any levels of restlessness. But legally speaking, other than the fact that police would harass people, he has no, unless the CS in charge of internal security issues a gazette notice to say that this is the times that people should actually be open. You can't just wake up. I don't know where he got this from. But in regards to the opening up of the country, I'm personally pleased. I had a motion that was sponsored by my party in the National Assembly, and the issues that we had raised in that particular motion were exactly this: open up the country, come up with an economic stimulus program, and I'm glad that that has taken effect. Maybe the details, the nitty-gritties of what is in the economic stimulus program are issues. Some of them I might be in agreement with. Some of them I might not be in agreement with. And I say this because I jealously guard an area that I represent, the needs of the people of Mombasa. the desires of the people of Mombasa, what we feel we have already wasted economically over the years, social impact that this has had on us over the year. So definitely, when of course, when the president makes an announcement like this, it's usually followed with a supplementary budget. When the supplementary budget comes in, we expect to lead a number of us to come up with issues that we need to fight for what we feel is right for our people as well.
So what is it you agree with on this package, and what is it you do not agree?
I for one, agree with the Kazi Mitaani program. It is something that in my own motion I had recommended that this is the way to go. In fact, I even went ahead. If you read the president's speech, he said this should be in every single county. But then with the concentration on densely populated areas, you're going to have a problem where, what if you go to a certain county where some constituencies are very, very sparsely populated? So you might have a problem of an unfair level of distribution of resources. And I had actually suggested that in areas where the population is not extremely high, you can actually come up with a program and call it Kazi Mashambani, where it does not have to be necessarily an urban area. But then at the same time, I mean, look at all the issues that the president has talked about. And I just want to flip them through you. From the tea sector, the sugar sector, coffee sector, livestock. He's talking about within a period of 7 days that the price of animal feeds needs to go down, and I'm hoping that they're not planning to do price controls, because then that makes our economy to get into other problems as well. 8 billion for classrooms across the country. Held 50 new level 3 hospitals across the country, the Kazi Mitaani. Then a framework to stabilize the cost of fuel. I don't know what exactly was meant by this, because there's already a law on this. There's already a law in regards to stabilizing of fuel prices. And I think if you're aware, the Committee on Finance as well recently tabled a report. And in that report, it was very, very clear that the taxes that Kenyans were actually paying for purposes of stabilizing fuel prices, that money was used for something else. So when you look at all this, where I come from, we have no tea, we have no livestock, we have no coffee, we have no sugar. But what we do have is sand, and people. We have the port, where we come from, based on our geographical location. A good 27% of the gross county product of Mombasa comes from transport, logistics, clearing and forwarding. I was expecting something as well on the same.
Okay.
You know, other than the fact that, which I don't know, these classrooms as well, they've not indicated where these classrooms are going to be. They've not indicated where these hospitals are going to be. So other than Kazi Mitaani, what is really coming to us? The issue of credit reference bureau, CRB, for you to be listed, if you're more than 5 million is when you can get listed. Less than 5 million, you get scrapped for a period of time. And then there was the other issue that the president talked about, and this is the issue of $1 million shillings, $10,000 if you want. I'm aware, and I stand to be corrected. I truly do stand to be corrected. I might not have a grasp of everything that goes on entirely in the National Assembly, and neither would any member actually. But I do recall that there was a time that Honorable Junaid had raised this matter, that it had not passed through the proper forms of legislation. So I do not know what exactly, and then the president has now said that we're going to increase it, but to a figure that we're not aware of.
Okay. Honorable Sakwa, looking at or listening to Abdul Swamad, I get the feeling that you feel we put a lot of big figures with some ambiguity on what we're going to do with these big figures. Do you share the sentiments?
Okay, not entirely. My view on this is that through these measures, for once, the president is trying to make a correction in the economy. Each time that we've heard speeches on days of this nature, it has been largely infrastructure. And of course, basic economics says infrastructure is good because it provides for long-term improved mobility. It could create jobs, particularly in economies which produce all of the inputs in the infrastructure. The type of infrastructure we have, even cement is being imported. Many of the iron works that are needed, the basic roads are also being imported. So, there's a lot of leakage in the economy. But for once, it's talking about areas where you may be able to get some immediate productivity gains. Not the credit reference, but support to the small-scale sector, small and medium enterprises. Yeah. On tea, you get a gain probably in a season, so it's several months away before anything can come out of it. But the subsidy they have on fertilizer, that can have immediate gains. The support to livestock, particularly because of the drought in those areas, might lead to increased offtake, reduced losses as you supply the market. So those things are generally positive. But I think that it's a correction that's coming long after we have really leaned heavily on infrastructure, which does not have equitable distribution of jobs and so on. The sectors that will bounce back the economy are in tourism, for example, the restaurant industry, small-scale agriculture, in transport. Those are the areas that will bounce back the economy much more quickly. I personally do not like the provision in the CRB. We must learn to provide discipline in the financial sector right from the beginning. The moment people think, because when you do what they are saying, it means that even if you do not meet your obligations at levels below 5 million, you'll not be called out for defaulting. The only way the sector will grow with the discipline is that from the age 18, for example, I know even in Parliament there are moves that young people should not be listed. That's a big mistake. You are 18, you're old enough to marry, you're old enough to be hanged if you committed a crime. Therefore, you're old enough to account for the failures that you might have. And if you look at global experience, this starts about that time. So by the time they get the 25s and the 30s, they're now used to not defaulting willfully and nilly-willy. So that, I think, is probably not going to help the economy at all.
And still on that, you raise a moral question, but anybody who lives in this country will tell you the reality on the ground is different. COVID-19 has devastated people's businesses. They have not been able to pay their facilities. Students listed for things like not being able to pay a HELB loan. Why? They have not gotten jobs yet. So would you still raise a moral question when the realities on the ground
Actually, I want to raise an economic question. Because the economy is not doing well, it's possible for the CRB group of companies to be leaned on not to list people at a certain level. It's not for executive authority because they don't have any ameliorating counter strategy. You don't list these people, then what happens? Up to 5 million, our Juakali industry, probably I have not looked at the numbers well, maybe 50% will be that category. And therefore you will have a whole sector which is going to be in debt. And when banks resume, when activities resume, they are not going to lend to people who have been defaulting to them. So you're shooting yourself in the foot by doing this. I think there might be other ways that you can lean on. You can delay, for example, for people who don't have jobs. You can say you must have been in a job for 6 months at least before you can get listed. Let the listing companies then and the banks and financial institutions adjust their criteria for it. I'm talking purely as an economist on this, but there are political decisions you can make. I've seen it, as I was saying, in Parliament. There's a big push that we shouldn't list anybody who is a youth. A youth is up to 35. 35 now. These are grown-ups that have to live by the discipline of the financial sector.
Okay. Do you agree?
Maybe in the Juakali sector itself, and this contributes a huge percentage of those who actually are employed. Through the informal sector, it's way more than those who are employed through the formal sector. And he was asking, Mheshimiwa was talking about that he doesn't have the figures, but I think more than 50% of these informal sectors have actually shut down. It was that bad. And I agree with you. When someone takes a loan, it was not because of their need. Some of these companies, forget about just the CRB listing and everything else. If you don't rein in some level of discipline, have gone to an extent that they actually now reach levels of trying to embarrass. Like they just send to your friends and everyone else who is on your call register, and they'll tell these people, tell so and so. For some reason, a lot of people have my number. For some reason, I do get a number of these messages, tell so and so to kindly pay their debt. These people did not want to be in such a situation. The right answer, and in fact, this particular economic stimulus package that the president has put into place, what is talked about, the only part that is talked about the informal sector gaining from this is from the 8 billion for building the classrooms. But this is going to have to come with changes in law, because the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, I'm trying to figure out a clause in the laws that say that give this to someone who is just within that vicinity. It's not going to happen. What you can do, which is within law, is say that this is set aside for those who are women, people living with disability, and the youth. But you can't tie it down. And then secondly, the informal sector as well. Not every one of them is registered to own a company where they can be able to get some level of certification from the National Construction Authority. So I don't know how this is going to work, that we have to concentrate. It's not even about bending laws. We will be breaking the laws. And unless they're going to come, when they bring this in, they're going to also bring it in together with amendments to the law. But, and I don't know how they're going to word it. How do you even identify a company that is within the vicinity?
It's a big question, and quite a number of people have asked. But this would not be the first time the president has said that. Even in the last announcement of stimulus package,
the last
so
announcement
is it working?
The last announcement of you remember when they were doing the school desks?
Yes.
That was easier because you can go to a Juakali sector, and the county commissioner, the deputy county commissioner can just go to the Juakali sector. But you know, there's some places where the Juakali sector as well was unable. I know of areas where I had to donate out of goodwill and courtesy, and I had to look for donors to actually transport desks from one county to another county, not for any other reason, but because the other counties had no facility to be able to do this. So I do not know how this is going to actually help those people who are in the informal sector. I have no idea how this is going to happen.
All right.
One additional thing I would add to that is that in respect of the classrooms, which is a very important one, remember we have a CBC rolled out. I personally have not seen the infrastructure transformation program. Yes, you can do a classroom here, a classroom there. They may add up to 10,000. But the needs, for example, in my constituency, where the school system relatively is probably medium to small size, I have about 60 primary schools and about 30 secondary schools, about 90 grade 1 through secondary school. My demand for new classrooms is over 300. And we have, in the country, we have 25,000 schools or something. Maybe I think it's a bit bigger than that. 10,000 is just a drop in the ocean. And as it has happened before, government has not demonstrated a capacity to do this where it is needed or to do it equitably. And I have a feeling, first, it's too small, distribution will be inadequate, so government is still hiding its head in the sand on how to cope with CBC rollout. And I think they must come out and tell us where they would have liked to reach and where they are, so we can begin to assess the shortfall. What they're giving us is the half glass full. So we're supposed to be happy with the 10,000. How many should they be for them to completely transform the system? That's how planning should be done. So you plan to reach the target, and you tell people where you are. But tell people where you are and you don't give any notion. And they're the only ones with the data, with the accurate data. So I think that's a lesson that really they must get into. We have not done well with infrastructure. This will ease. It's not going to solve the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's small.
Right.
It's rather small. 10,000 is very small.
Okay.
You know, you are aware that I have no idea, other than the Kazi Mitaani, which is something that they already have a structure for it and everything else, the CRB. The other thing that the President has talked about is to enhance digital payment. So I'm assuming this is the likes of M-Pesa and the rest. But I'm trying to think the issue of building these 50 new level 3s, building these 10,000 classrooms, the fertilizer subsidy, I'm assuming that they're going to just simply say that we're giving this money to either cereals board or whoever it is that you import in the fertilizer, or KTDA, and they tell them that you import the fertilizer, we're going to pay you a certain amount. But you know, all these other matters that are here, there's procurement involved. I don't know whether we can be able to comfortably see this passing through within the shortest time possible. First, you know, you have to have a drawing of the classes. You have to have identified where these classes are. Do we have enough public works officers to actually do enough drawings, BQs, spread out across everywhere? Have they done a needs analysis per constituency on how many classrooms are actually needed to be able to achieve the CBC? Then after that comes the procurement process. And that is if we don't have anyone going to the complaints part, that they felt that they were vindicted and they were, you know, marginalized and they did not get that kind of work.
Right.
Then bearing in mind as well that we are entering into elections where the whole country is just going to go fizzy very, very soon. So I do not know. It's a very, very ambitious program.
Okay.
If we all put our heads together and say that we're patriotic enough and we put everything aside, it is feasible. But I wish this had come a bit earlier.
A bit earlier. But looking at the big question right now from everybody, and you began by saying this should be followed by a supplementary budget. Perhaps we'll see that coming. How are we going to finance this? We know the kind of position the country finds itself money-wise. We are literally living on the edge. Does this mean new tax policies that, again, will come back to hurt Kenyans? How does this look like from where you sit?
I think there are other ways they could do it from a budgeting point of view, if they have the courage to do so, is to slow down other proposed investments, to cut back, even cancel, particularly the chunky ones, the big ones. You start them off, they take 5 years of construction and maybe subsequent period before it really takes off. And for a period of a year, when you're trying to do adjustment, respond to crises of this nature, you can actually cut back. That has not been the experience. The experience with supplementaries have been almost invariably an increase in expenditure. So what happens then? You can deal with it, which I think it's really a bad way of doing it. You deal with it simply by not implementing what you have not said you have changed. You have some chunky projects, they are in the books, they just lie low, and then you move on and do something else. And at the end of the year, you find that where you have ended up does not have sufficient relationship with where you started out. So they could do that. They could also, of course, look out for it makes a difference in local expenditure, not in the aggregate, but you can look out for people who can provide donors. So you go with your bowl, begging bowl, and you get people who can give grants and so on, because we are not in a capacity to really borrow heavily at this moment. But as my colleague has said, as Abdul Samad has said, we are heading into elections, so maybe these finer details are not terribly significant now. And I can bet that the exhortations now, the pronouncements now, will have not much bearing to the actual operations and outcome. So I think that this, in my view, the president has touched on things that touch ordinary people, farmers, and so on, the juakalis and that kind of thing. The how, the what is now quite clear, just how it will be done, and he has outlined some of that. I think on the how, what I would say in conclusion is one useful model that this country has got is the CDF model. And when you have got divisible items like the type we have got here, classrooms, hospitals, perhaps hospitals get probably a bit bigger, but classroom and so on, if they are sort of subdivided out to the various counties and constituencies, they can be more easily, because it will now be a small expenditure in each area, and you can get around part of the procurement problem, perhaps. As I speak now, there was a program by some international donors on a school infrastructure, but they had given large contracts in the whole area, a whole county, for example. It didn't go very well. The president suspended it for reasons I'm not quite clear myself. I don't think it has restarted. I understand it might start soon. But if it had gone the CDF model, which is being studied by many other countries around the world, then it would reduce them to smaller expenditures, which can then be implemented. Right. Because if you have a classroom, if you're going to do 2 classrooms or 5 classrooms in your constituency, that's not a big deal. But if you're going to be in an area where you have to do 1,000 classrooms, that's a big chunky one, and it's a problem.
Can we afford this, Abdul Samad?
The only way out, the only way that I can see is, as my colleague has rightfully said, they're just going to have to cut down on other things. One thing that they would probably not cut down on is roads, because roads is funded by the road levy. You know, there's money that is collected, unless now we're going to change the laws on road levy, which a certain amount of money goes, and that money is collected. It goes to the Kenya Roads Board, and the Kenya Roads Board now distributes it to Kera, Kenha, Kura, KWS, the county governments, and the rest. But other than that, I don't see how else. I truly don't see how else we're going to be able to finance this. The only way that I can think of is to try and reshuffle. We eagerly have to wait for the supplementary. I'm assuming the supplementary budget, if at all we really want to do this, we should be getting it immediately. We come back from recess. By mid of November, we should be having the supplementary. Then, of course, as per the constitution of this country, there has to be public participation. People have to have their input in. Everyone has to do whatever it is, preferably and hopefully that the high courts don't once again declare all this unconstitutional and everything else. That's why I said, if we put everything else aside, it is achievable. But bearing in mind the experience of what it is that we have seen in the country, you will not be in a position to blame anyone who is not skeptical enough to say that it is achievable.
It is achievable.
I could just add a very quick one.
Yes.
I think this is a time where we know what is likely to happen. The supplementary may not put too much effort on cutting back. We know that's what should happen. I think it's time now that the president can say, if I have to achieve any of this, then I should do the right thing. I should do what should happen. And what should happen is slow down some, cut back some. On the tax increase, you remember Kenyans, for the first time, probably in our history, I could be wrong on that timing of that, frequency of that, but when Aichi pushed back on taxes, he said enough is enough. And as I speak now, we in Parliament have had ongoing processes now to try and cut back some of the tax increases that had been done. We have been increasing this in a linear way. Just you have a huge budget. We had 3.6 trillion. We had some debate about whether we should really go to that size of budget. It doesn't lead to faster growth at all, especially if you're going to finance it the way we are financing it. And that maybe a smaller budget that we can fund lead to more stability, better growth, like Kibaki did during his time. He had smaller deficits. He could have gone much bigger, and he had a lot of goodwill even internationally. He didn't go that route. Now we have gone to the route in which we always have huge deficits, and we carry on and we accumulate them. So now I think the option to increase taxes has been reduced because people are completely conscious about not wanting to pay higher taxes. It probably will lead us to more financial prudence. And we like to quote Kibaki because we'd say, let's do like he did during his time. He stabilized the infrastructure sector, which had been a disaster. The finance sector, we grew at a rapid rate without accumulating too much debt. This can be done, but now let's wait and see how they tackle it come what you call supplementary budget time. I don't have much hope on that.
You talk about the size of the economy, and the other concern here is looking at the previous stimulus packages that have been given, the past two, we're now talking about 25. So if you put this together, that will be about 81 billion in stimulus packages so far since the inception of COVID-19. Are we feeling the impact? Is it serving its intended purpose?
I think it is. You know, a little can go a long way. If I was to judge it by how I see people in my own constituency and county being a rural one, that is, I think, greatly underperforming, whatever little it is goes a long way. People have been so pushed, and probably it's even worse in urban areas where the daily survival is related to daily wage. And you go, you don't get a daily wage, you come back empty-handed. I have got messages on my phone. Somebody says, I don't have dinner for the family. I need 200, but even if you have 50, send it to me. And I don't know what they would do with 50. Maybe I don't know. It was just desperate. And these are people who would otherwise not be begging. It's been really tough. And of course, the distribution question, how far out does the money go? Does it reach the ordinary people? It's not just between those employed in the formal areas. In the villages, I'm sure in urban slums and other places where people live on the edge, it's been really, really difficult. So I would say anything that has gone out there, except personally, I thought that the initial subsidies that supported the industry rather than the employees and so on, direct subsidies to the employees, was probably not as effective. We learned this from the American stimulus. Of course, they have a much more functional economy all around. But even there, it was clear that, yes, you want to support the employers to recover. The degree to which they recover does not completely save the unemployment situation. So that these subsidies directly there, so you stimulate consumption, and the industries to which their consumption directed can then recover because the incomes will come. It's sometimes a debatable matter, but in every situation one needs to assess and monitor. Yeah.
Abdul Swamad, tourism was key among those that the government paid very keen attention on when it came to some of these interventions it made. How has it worked so far?
I would have preferred it in this manner. I would have preferred it in terms of size. Size is in terms of what it is that you have been able to give in. And give people direct tax rebates. It's very, very simple. You're asking someone, take your money up front, work harder, so when you work, and you have to reach a level X for you to be able to get Y, you'll strive because you know that I'm getting this through tax rebate. Either make those entities have a certain amount of money where they don't have to make either VAT returns up to a certain level of money, or they don't have to make, that's a direct injection. It's an IV. You know, you're giving people a direct 16% of up to a certain limit. And then now you're also encouraging them that, you know what, if your quota is 1 million shillings, you're encouraging that person to make sales worth 840,000 shillings for them to be able to earn out of that. And it's better than all these, you know, all these other packages right now, because you walk into some hotels and they tell you, we have no idea. We just have no idea what this economic stimulus package is is in it for us, you know. So I would assume that, you know, you work out a formula based on over the last, they have this, The tourism fund has this. All these other levies, they have this, where the turnover that you've been doing, there's a certain percentage that you have to pay. So look at that and then say that you're entitled to this amount of money. Do not return taxes for up to this level. And if you can be able to do sales and boost yourself and you go higher for up to, let's say, 3 months, then on the 4th month, you should be back on your feet, start paying your taxes. But if you, at the same time, were struggling so hard, then you're told, you know what, we're going to give you a period of 1 financial year where you have to now increase your sales. So now what is going to happen? You as an outlet are going to go out of your way to make sales. Either you're going to come up with some promotion, you're going to do anything to be able to it doesn't even have to be VAT. What if you try and tell them that, you know what, the pay as you earn, that you're meant to pay on behalf of your employees. Don't pay the pay as you earn. So first thing that you're going to do, you're going to hire more people. And by hiring more people, you're simply now increasing. And the reason why it's called a stimulus package, the word stimulus itself is to stimulate. You're stimulating. You know, it's not meant to be a permanent solution. It's meant to give an electric wave through the economic nervous system so that things jump back into normality. And things can only jump back into normality by giving that, that nudge, that push.
Do you think we have it right when it comes to balancing between this financial stimulus and fiscal stimulus? When you look at this particular one, it is heavier on financial stimulus than fiscal stimulus. Looking back from the first one, how are we balancing this out? Are we getting it right?
They need to move together. Government has been reluctant to use the fiscal stimulus in any significant way. And whatever there was, that financial was generally small and unclearly defined, in my view. I think, just picking up a bit what my colleague said, but adding to it, you can work with employers also directly by subsidizing their payroll. You know, sort of, for example, the reduction, instead of reducing staff and asking them to go home, they could maintain perhaps a larger number and they could get a subsidy on the payroll. That's possible. That could be done. The other aspect that he has talked about is very important, which is cut back on the taxes. But you can't cut back taxes if you don't look at your expenditures. You can't, in our 3.6 trillion budget, each time anybody says cut taxes, they must be saying, these guys don't know what they're talking about. How are we going to finance this whole thing? You don't have to have that big budget. And that's the argument we have had for a long time. If you looked at it critically, it is we are going to be we are the biggest in East Africa, bigger than everybody put together. That's not a source of pride. The source of pride should be how affordable our financing plans are for that size of budget. If we aren't there, we can get there gradually, we can go by. And there's no harm. Nothing has been much committed. This is what, October? We are just beginning to get funds flowing for, in activities like our CDF funds. We just got a little money the other day, and there are many other counties are all getting a small bit of what they're supposed to get. We are not going too far into it. That can be, some of it can be slowed down through the supplementary, formally reduce the size of the budget. So the demands on the revenue side are less. But if you leave this standing there and you simply temporarily reduce this, you're going to have to come back another way and recover it. You don't want to say, don't pay now, but when you recover, you'll have to pay the arrears of it. You haven't done very much. You keep the enterprises and the workers, you know, below the line. And remember, in Kenya, our level of overall employment is low. A huge chunk, the people who are unemployed may be as big as those who are now in employment, and they're educated. They have been educated on loans or government support service or their family's commitment. They are out of jobs. You want arrangements, as my colleague says, which can bring in some of the people that are out there when the recovery occurs. We just can't be worrying about the few that are already in jobs only.
You know, whether we like it or not, we have a country that has, you can never run away from those responsibilities. It's actually your patriotic responsibility, whether you're in leadership today or you're going to be in leadership tomorrow, to take things the way they are and simply try and make them better. It is my belief and my hope. I strongly believe that my party leader will be the next president of this country, and I think, and just for the avoidance of doubt, that's Raila Amolo Odinga. But I think that the first thing that needs to happen is Kenya needs to renegotiate its debts. There's totally nothing wrong in saying that, you know what, we probably should. We swallowed more than we could actually be able to chew. Look at the whole thing and start saying that let us now renegotiate, even if it means getting someone else to buy off those debts for longer payment periods. You can easily now say that if our budget is this amount of money, a certain percentage was meant to go into paying of these loans. What if we reduce the amount of money we have to pay on an annual basis? And with that, then it gives people more breathing space.
But the Treasury CS himself has come out and said that we are not on the red, we are able to manage our debts.
But you see, that is now a decision that the government of the day has made. That is their view. And it might not necessarily be my view. It might not necessarily be Mheshimiwa's view here as well. It is, and by the way, diplomacy has it. No government will ever tell you that we're an elephant that cannot carry out tasks. Don't ever expect it. Don't ever expect it, however much that we are in. Don't ever expect them don't expect anyone to say that, you know.
Even in your house, you will not be able to do that.
No, I believe that if we were in leadership, we would not be in the position we're in anyway.
Okay. But let me just add something to that. I think that my colleague has just hinted on one of our worst problems we've got. We believe in people. We don't believe in what matters for our economy. Right now, the economy is the most critical thing, and he's mentioned his party leader is right to do so, but he has not mentioned in which way then the party leader's positions are meant to improve this economy. I think that's our biggest weakness. I think what we should be doing, let's leave out anybody's name across the board, including my own party leader, Musalia Mudavadi. I am an NC person, but let's leave all that out. Let us then focus on what is it that will take Kenya out of where we are. And then as a second order, then say, who approximates these things that would help us get out of it? We get into all of the enthusiasm in the whole thing. The day after the elections, people realize, oops, we have not solved the problem. So I really think that we should get our citizens, and in our own vocabulary, in our own arguments. My colleague is a businessman as well, so he knows very well what it might take.
I'm a very bad businessman, but I'm a very good legislator.
Okay, but it's in business. That what is it that these sectors need? What does our private sector need? Our business sector need? The public sector, now we know. We have got to a point where the public sector is now the areas of jobs of preference. It wasn't the same when after I left university many years back. Many times the private sector was paying way above government. But now government is paying much better, nominally and in real terms. It can't be the employer of first choice. And if you do that, you end up where we are now. You end up with a wage bill you cannot deal with. You end up with a huge public sector outlay that's trying to run ahead of all these needs, and you push out, you crowd out the private sector.
We have a few minutes to wind up. So when we look at this particular interventions, 13-point interventions that President Uhuru Kenyatta announced yesterday, and the whole conversation around economic recovery, would you say we're on the right path as a country?
As my colleague has rightfully said, anything is better than nothing. Anything is better than nothing. When I put in a motion regarding economic stimulus package, and I talked about things like the Kazi Mitaani program, this is not a permanent solution. This is meant to be there because I would rather have a young person from Mombasa earning a living by doing whatever it is that they're doing than having them being idle and being easily advocated to do something that is criminal in nature. And when you've got a population of this country, the highest population that we've ever had is the younger people, the younger generation. You need to give these people a reason to have hope. Leadership is nothing else except providing hope to people. Leadership is nothing else except providing that much needed, assurance to the people that you can be able to do that. When you have people that feel that they're at their lowest, a young couple that do not know where they're going to get a meal for their children, people, an animal, you lock a cat in a room with no food, you open that door, it's going to pounce on you, and you're not going to believe that that's the domestic animal. Imagine a human being.
Okay. Let me cut you short for a bit. We'll be getting back to studio. Remember, I mentioned that we'll be speaking to Kimani Ichung'wah, who's a member of Parliament Kikuyu. We now have him on phone. Thank you very much, Honorable Ichung'wah, for making time, albeit quite late, but thank you for making time for us here. We're talking about Uhuru Kenyatta's stimulus package totaling to 25 billion shillings to various sectors of the economy. Key among them, agriculture has gotten quite a chunk. We're talking about education. We're talking about health. Looking at these interventions, from where you sit, what are your thoughts? Do you see it working? Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, can you get me? Right, we seem to have lost him, so we'll try call him again to just get his thoughts before we wind up the show. But then getting it back to you, what do we need to do to get into a very robust economic recovery path?
I think that what we're doing, these are like the stimulus, is necessary given the trauma of COVID-19. But these are stopgap measures most of the time. The challenge now is to say which of these things must be sustained. Let's take the interventions in agriculture. We could say we must get back to the path in which agriculture is right at the center. It's a big share of the GDP, but how can we, on a long-term basis, stimulate and sustain growth in agriculture, which creates surpluses that goes in other sectors of the economy.
Okay.
We must learn to nurture and mainstream innovations that will help both rural and urban areas and so on, because I think that we have a lot of creativity which seems to come out sparks out and then again dies. We must have a conscious policy that nurtures innovation, because we have proved that we can be as good as anybody else anywhere else in the world.
All right, I'm getting back to you. But here we have Kimani Ichung'wah with us. We'll be getting back to studio. I'll give you some considerable amount of time to just articulate your issues on your thoughts on Uhuru Kenyatta's stimulus package and whether it will be impactful to the common mwananchi.
Akisa, thank you. If you can hear me now.
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. I was saying is a drop in the ocean and a little too late. If you look at economies around the world, many of them are doing close to about 10% of their total budget, stimulus packages to their economies post-COVID. And 25 billion shillings in a budget of about 3 trillion, slightly above 3 trillion shillings, is a drop in the ocean and a little bit too late. I've just caught up with you, and I heard what Mheshimiwa was saying about the interventions, for instance, in the agricultural sector. If you ask yourself 1.5 billion shillings to the sugar industry sector in Kenya, what will 1.5 billion shillings do? You must remember, and Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi sat with me in the Budget and Appropriations Committee over the last close to 2.5 years, from 2018. And he will tell you, we allocated about 3 billion shillings to the coffee cherry revolving fund. If you ask coffee farmers whether they have really benefited from this fund since then, they haven't. Remember also last year, but one and the year before, President Uhuru Kenyatta gave directives on the payment of pending bills to the National Treasury. I think it started in the 2018, if not Jamhuri Day, Madaraka Day. Those directives, you can take it to the bank, were either not followed through by the National Treasury, or if they were followed through by the National Treasury, then the ministries and government agencies never followed through in actual payments to suppliers and government. And one of the things that you may need today to stimulate the economy is to make sure that productive sectors of the economy are well greased in terms of liquidity and having liquidity to flow in the market. You cannot have liquidity moving around in the market if government that is the largest consumer of goods and services in the country is not paying its pending bills. And therefore, maybe I would have asked President Uhuru Kenyatta to ask himself what has happened to all his previous directives to the National Treasury in relation to matters to do with the economy. Have they been followed through? If they've been followed through, what has been the impact of those directives in terms of being able to stimulate the economy? And also the quantum of what he is doing. And I'm saying is a little bit of tokenism and trying to appease everybody at the same time. I would have preferred an instance where President Uhuru Kenyatta is forthright in telling us that these are the sectors and the areas I want to be the drivers of getting the economy moving again. And for me, if you ask me, the agricultural sector is one of those sectors that would take a long time to turn around. And that's why I gave you the case example, the coffee industry, the sugar industry. Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi comes from the sugar belt in Western Kenya, and he will tell you it is not a problem you can sort out with 1.5 billion shillings. Mumia sugar alone, or even Nzoia sugar, cannot be sorted out with a mere 1.5 billion shillings. The coffee industry, the same thing. The tea sector, the same thing. What are we doing to ensure that we also help dairy farmers? What are we doing to help those traders who, within the period that COVID came in, had their businesses closed down? Those traders whose businesses we interfered with before even COVID, and I have the case example of importers who are importing things from China, Dubai, and elsewhere, that we branded their goods counterfeit and burnt their goods and destroyed businesses and destroyed people's livelihoods. Really, and I honestly sympathize with President Uhuru Kenyatta because he seems too eager to try and please the country in terms of what he wants to offer, but he doesn't seem to have clearly thought out what exactly he wants to achieve in terms of an economic stimulus package. It is tokenism to me that seeks to appease certain regions of the country, probably for political expediency, but not really to deal with the real issues that touch on the economy. A quick win for me would have been on pending bills to make sure that those people whose businesses are closed down, be it in the hospitality sector. I've seen countries around the world where people have injected real money into the hospitality industry, where hotels, tour and travel companies closed down and businesses were shut down, and there have been good interventions in making sure that the hospitality industry, the travel and transport sectors, think about our bars and restaurants today, that you give them packages that ensure that there is continuity in their businesses, and those who close down are able to reopen their businesses and ensure that there is money flowing around in the economy. All the interventions I've seen from President Uhuru Kenyatta, and I think I was just listening to another conversation elsewhere, people saying even the CRB thing is not something that you can take to the bank and say tomorrow that everybody who is listed for loans above 5 million shillings will be delisted. It's not going to happen that way.
I don't know if we still have you, but Looking at some of the other interventions on education, 8 billion towards expansion of infrastructure around the CBC program. We're talking about 3.2 billion shillings for health to build at least 50 level 3 hospitals across the country. We're talking about 10 billion shillings for the Kazi Mtaani. That really should be a quick fix for this period to just help a number of young people, be able to make ends meet within this period of time. There seems to be a concern from my panelists here, and especially on the question of education and health, that perhaps the planning is quite ambiguous and how we are going to do this and where these classrooms are and where these hospitals are. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
My two colleagues in studio, Akisa, will tell you. And more so, Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, who I sat with in the Budget and Appropriations Committee last year when COVID hit us. In the annual estimates, and I think, I don't know the annual estimates or the first supplementary of last year, we had a similar intervention where they put in some money towards building of new classrooms in secondary schools. I will invite you, send your camera crew tomorrow to Karai Mixed Day Secondary School in Kikuyu. Look at the kind of classroom that was done that is substandard, that is below the normal size of a classroom, at a cost of about 1.8 or 1.5 million shillings, I was told. And it's just the basic shell structure, not complete, and the school is asked to more infrastructure funds from their own kitty to complete the classroom. It is a classroom that is probably 3/4 the size of a classroom that I do with CDF at half that cost. Therefore, if you're looking at 8 billion to have the building of new classrooms, I'll tell you, we are just opening a new avenue for corruption in the Ministry of Education, just like what happened with the first COVID intervention. Think about the hospitals. I don't remember, was it to hospitals or to build, or some amount to build 22 new hospitals, level 3 hospitals. Has anybody bothered to find out whether the need is a need for level 3 hospitals across the country? Or is it basic clinical medicine interventions that we need at this particular time? Do we have enough drugs in our hospitals even to deal with the COVID pandemic? Are issues to do with healthcare more with the provision of medical care or the provision of healthcare infrastructure? Because if you ask me, with county governments having the devolved function of developing healthcare centers, right. They have more than enough money to develop healthcare facilities. But again, Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi sitting there with you, he'll tell you, when NMS came, some 2.1 billion shillings was allocated to build, I think, 30 hospitals around Nairobi at a cost of 70 million shillings, I think, per hospital. If you go to the facilities that have been done and look for the value for that money, trust me, Akisa, you will not find value for 70 million shillings in terms of the buildings that have been put up. If you look at the process of procurement of all those buildings done by NMS around the city of Nairobi, and I'm inviting you and your camera crew because you also have a role to provide oversight of a government.
Right.
Drive around Nairobi, find out how many hospitals have been built, who has built them, how was the procurement process done. And when I say we are opening new avenues for corruption under the disguise of an economic stimulus package, you will see probably even these 22 new hospitals will end up with to the same contractors, same suppliers, classrooms in the Ministry of Education, the same thing. And therefore, there are not interventions really to me that will work towards stimulating the economy. They are just new avenues for corruption.
I want to let you go. I want to let you go. Closing remarks in just under a minute. What you're saying in very many words, that this was a political statement from the president?
A huge political statement, in my view. Nothing that was well thought out, and I'll be waiting to see when they table the first supplementary budget. Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi still sits in the budget committee. He will be able to tell us whether all those interventions as were outlined by the president will be reflected in a supplementary budget. Otherwise, I will take it that the president was simply playing politics. All
right. Thank you very much for speaking to us and making time for us. We really appreciate that effort. Member of Parliament Kikuyu Kimani Ichung'wah there. And we've heard what he has had to say, a drop in the ocean, too little, too late. the tokenism. The president is trying to impress everybody in various sectors, but at the end of the day, we just might not be successful. As we give our closing remarks, your thoughts on what Kimani Ichung'wah says?
Clearly, 25 billion is a lot of money in itself, but in a year in which our budget size is 3.6 trillion, and October means we have gone July, August, September, October, that's about 30%. Our expenditure levels, if you even it out, would be something like 1.2 trillion. 25 billion is probably a bit small to redirect it. So I think it's in that respect that he says probably is too small, too late. But what impressed me, though, that for the first time, the president was calm, and I guess he truly believed in what he was saying. Many times he's angry, he's threatening, and then you see the net result then is after you cool down, you forget what you said. For the first time, he was cordial, he was friendly, but indeed it's true that 25 billion stimulus is okay for now until we get the supplementary, and the supplementary budget itself must be restructured to be targeted towards an in-COVID development strategy. Which
I'm glad you sit in that committee.
I'm in the budget committee, but okay, we can say more things about that. I think one weakness we have, and I'll say that just in half under a minute, one weakness we have, I think Parliament does not stand up to the President. If we had been standing up to the President, there would have been corrective measures. You would know how far not to push. But people interpret support to the President to mean you must say yes to everything that comes. That's how we have ended up where we are. Okay. I think Parliament has a role to play. They have underplayed it.
Do you agree? Closing remarks?
First and foremost, I'm not surprised with Honorable Ichung'wah's comments. He did definitely, and it's his right, he says it's his own opinion, but likening the fact that if you build a hospital and then those who are in charge of running the hospital do not put the medicines there, does not mean that there was no need for it. One, what I just want to know is the locations of these facilities, because health is devolved. Does it mean that the national government is giving this money as a grant? Is it a conditional grant? Who's going to be able to build these? Is it going to be built by the county governments? None of this is clear so far unless we get supplementary. But saying that we don't need these facilities is not true. It's like saying that just because, you know, I gave you a car, because I do feel that you need to move around and you do need a car. And then after a few months, you decide to let the tires wear out and you decide that the tires should, you know...
Perhaps for him it's a question of priority.
No, I think health is a priority. Health is a priority. In fact, it's a priority from our forefathers before independence. One of the elements that was there was access to good health. The thing that I do agree with him, though, is pending bills. Where I sit, every single day, we get the amount of pending bills are so humongous. And it is really, really huge, extremely huge. And this is not just national government alone, county government as well. People need to pay. Please, 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 you know, pay. That's the only way that the economy is going to be able to rotate.
Okay. We'll have to wind up at that point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us. Abdul Swamad Sharif Nasir is a Member of Parliament in Vita, Sakwa Bunyasi, Member of Parliament Nambale, and Kimani Ichung'wah, Kikuyu Member of Parliament, who's just spoken to us on phone. Thank you for engaging with us and your comments on our social media platforms. I'll be seeing you next time here on Crossfire. I am Akisa Wandera. Have a good night.